Welcome to the 700 Club. Thanks so much for joining us. Dialing up pressure from maximum to excruciating. Two former Trump administration members say that's the only way to force Iran to roll back its nuclear program.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration continues to make concessions to get the Islamic regime back to the negotiating table. CBN News national security correspondent Caitlin Burke has the story.
Officials believe Iran is only weeks away from having enough fuel to build a nuclear weapon, something the Biden administration blames on former President Donald Trump.
Iran's increased capability and capacity, their aggressive actions that they have taken through proxy wars around the world would be happening if the former president had not recklessly pulled out of the nuclear deal.
But Len Khodorkovsky, a former senior advisor to Trump's Iran envoy, says their maximum pressure campaign did exactly what it was meant to.
Iran was down to about $4 billion in cash reserves when the Biden administration came to office. That was the result of the sanctions and the pressure of the maximum pressure campaign. Its proxies around the region were at the weakest point ever, as was the regime.
Khodorkovsky says all that changed was an easing of sanctions after Biden took office,
which sent the wrong signal to the Iranian regime and unleashed their sprint to where they are right now. So the Biden administration gave the Iranian regime the space it needed, the cover it needed to get to where they are and have much greater leverage, of which they had really none when the administration started.
While current thinking is that re-entering a nuclear deal is the only way to prevent a nuclear Iran, Khodorkovsky and other former Trump administration officials point to alternative options.
I think the only way to reverse the progress that the Iranian regime has made to date is to turn maximum pressure to excruciating pressure. That will send exactly the right message as to what we will find acceptable.
Eli Kohanim, former deputy special envoy to combat anti-Semitism, says Iran has a track record of cheating on its deals with the U.S., and a diplomatic track may no longer be the answer.
Many voices argue that the United States should actually show a very strong military resolve to the Iranians and let them understand that there are red lines that they cannot cross, and that if the Iranians are not willing to let go of their desire to achieve a nuclear weapons state, that there would be military consequences to that decision-making.
When the U.S. re-entered negotiations with Iran, President Biden promised that a new deal would be longer and stronger than the original. Khodorkovsky calls the deal currently on the table weaker and shorter. Republicans vow that they will block any final agreement if the administration chooses to send it to Congress, but Democrats maintain they won't have the votes. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Well, I think we ought to take Iran at its word, and its word is rather harsh. They call us the great Satan. They call Israel the little Satan. And in that ideology, there's nothing they won't do to destroy the great Satan, and there's nothing they won't do to destroy the little Satan. They are the largest funder of terrorism in the world today. Hamas gets all of its weapons from Iran. Hezbollah gets all of its funding, all its weapons from Iran. Let us wake up to the very real and present danger that regime holds, not just for peace in the Middle East, but peace throughout the world. If they get a nuclear weapon, they pretty much have guaranteed they're going to use it. But why in the world will you try to negotiate with a terrorist state and say, no, we'll give you money if you don't develop that? Well, they're just going to use the money to fund more weapons and more adventures, if you will, in terrorism and these proxy wars. They're funding all of it. So why in the world will we ever support them? Well, in other news, a key measure on inflation shows prices are going to keep rising. Our nation's schools are already feeling the impact. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Wholesale prices rose nearly a tenth, 9.7% over the last year, meaning consumers are paying more for goods and services. Those high prices, combined with supply chain issues, are creating food shortages in school cafeterias. CBN's Brady Carter shows us how administrators and staff in 2 Virginia school districts are keeping students fed and healthy.
Now that students are returning to the classroom, they're feeling COVID's impact in the lunchroom. Some school administrators say their challenges feeding America's children are unnecessary, and supply chain issues are not the only reason causing this burden.
I have been extremely stressed over the last really 2 years. I am getting closer to retirement, and it has certainly helped me decide that I will not stay any longer than I have to.
Kathy Hicks' nervous laughter follows a sentiment shared by many trying to feed children at school. Shortages created by supply chain backups are the most recent headache.
We were continuously substituting products, whether it be a paper product or an entree, a meat product, or fruit or veggie.
Undue stress in the lunchroom created by this unpredictability is transferring to the classroom.
I would say that a hungry child cannot learn.
It's been almost a year since President Biden signed an executive order to fix America's supply chain backups. Still, ripple effects and staffing shortages have left districts scrambling to feed students without compromising nutrition.
We are down about almost 60 school nutrition staff who work in our kitchen.
Larry Wade directs 45 school menus, food purchase plans, and staff rosters throughout Chesapeake, Virginia's public school system. That adds up to almost 20,000 school lunches and 14,000 breakfast meals each day.
It is a major operation and it's business. I think here in Chesapeake, we're probably one of the largest restaurant chains, if you will, in the entire city. And despite the fact that something may not come in the back door, we still ensure that every student has a healthy and nutritious meal every single day.
Another challenge, food and labor shortages forcing suppliers to pick and choose where they sell their food. Some have even canceled school contracts due to low profit margins compared to big box retailers, leaving students to suffer the cost.
They, of course, are choosing the one they sell to the retailers, not to public
Because
schools.
They're making more money?
Yes, that makes sense in the business world. They have to survive, and they are shorthanded, and they can't make both lines.
And while some students wait for the return of chocolate milk or chicken nuggets, schools have made do thanks to food donations and pandemic assistance, plus a lot of hard work and creativity behind the scenes.
With the pandemic, we've served meals out of the back doors of school buses. We've taken meals to parks, and we have had families pick them up on curbside.
The Department of Agriculture is providing pandemic-related assistance, programs, and free meals to qualifying families through the school year. While Wade hopes these issues are resolved by the 2022-23 school year, he's hoping this assistance will remain in place just in case. Brody Carter, CBN News.
The ripple effects of the pandemic. Thank you, Brody. Well, turning now to the abortion debate in America, a new survey shows that men play a significant role in influencing the decision. Almost half say they encourage their partner to have an abortion. And maybe a surprise to you, many of the men involved regularly attend church. Now, pro-lifers are calling on churches to open the door for couples to talk about unplanned pregnancies. CBN's Heather Sells explains.
Men are not likely to be willing to share with someone else at church that they're going through that decision, or even after the fact that they have in the past made that decision.
And this new research backs that up. Almost half of those church-going men whose partners had an abortion admit that no one at their church knows about it.
Lifeway Research's Scott McConnell and Roland Warren, who leads pregnancy centers at CareNet, see a disconnect. Men attending church, claiming to uphold life, but not feeling free to talk when faced with an unplanned pregnancy.
Men do say that, the church certainly could be a place of support. They don't necessarily view the church as the first place to go for support, and that's a real problem.
The messages that the church is sending is often very clear, just simply saying abortion is a sin, and not understanding that there are couples facing some really difficult decisions. And yes, they got themselves into that situation, but they're going to need help at their point of need.
Last year, Lifeway surveyed 1,000 men who knew their partners were pregnant and then had an abortion. Half of them attend church once a month or more. Overall, the men pointed to finances as the main reason for their partner's abortion. They also cited relationship problems, feeling unprepared for fatherhood, or having enough kids already. 4 in 10 encourage their partner to get the abortion, while 3 in 10 offered no advice.
There's men who are staying silent because they're hearing the dialogue and the culture saying it's her body, her choice.
Warren says churches must offer ways for couples and especially men to talk.
There really aren't on-ramps in the church typically for someone who's facing a pregnancy decision.
It's why CareNet is offering a new curriculum for small groups designed to spur conversation and come alongside couples who need support. In the end, it can all come down to 9 days, says Warren, between when a woman confirms a pregnancy and then schedules or has an abortion. Heather Sells, CBN News.
An important conversation in the abortion debate. Gordon, back to you.
Well, it is an important conversation, and the word that kept coming up in that piece was partner. So we're not talking spouse, or necessarily we're talking spouse. We're talking about people living together, cohabiting, or doing I guess the modern thing, friends with benefits. That has no place in church. We've lost our grounding. If our debate now is, well, an unplanned pregnancy, what do we do? The debate should have happened a lot earlier. If I'm not fully committed to my partner and I want to make that commitment solemn and go through the sacrament of marriage and make a lifelong commitment to raise a family, to be together in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, if you're not willing to do that, then why are you doing this other? Because it's going to lead you down that path. You know, big surprise, sex leads to pregnancy. You shouldn't be surprised by that. And there's a very good reason the Bible says don't do this. The council in Jerusalem established the rules for the church, and sexual immorality is forbidden in the church. So don't give it excuse. Don't give it place. Realize you need to pull this way back. Terry, do you think we've just gone too far as a culture? Is that?
Yes. To sum it all up, I do. Well, I also think that Christian people are maybe more susceptible than others to this, because they don't want to do some of the things that would protect them from this, because they'd have to face
that
they're doing it. I'm making a specific decision.
So you're not planning to sin, you're just doing it.
It just happens, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think also in church, we don't talk about this much anymore because it is so pervasive in society. And if you think about it, the temptation now to do this is all around us. And now we're talking about 11-year-olds in school being...
Well, it's more than temptation. You are somehow strange if you're not doing it.
Yeah, true. Very true.
It's become the norm, and you see it reinforced by our culture again and again and again. But you wouldn't be in a position of deciding life or death for a child if you hadn't made first that other decision.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think sometimes we ease our consciences by accepting the fact that there are factions of society that don't consider the child yet. It's just a piece of tissue. It's not. And so, you know, I think we've come some ways in saying when the heart beats.
Well, medical science has proven it's a child.
It's a child.
You know, I've seen the picture. It's a child. There's even a motion picture where you know, you can see the child sucking its thumb. So yes, this is a life, and you're deciding life and death.
Yeah, it's a weighty issue. Absolutely, need to think on that a little bit more as a culture.